Welcome, everyone. So glad you've joined us this afternoon. My name is Sandra Reimer, and I work with Tour Imagination on their marketing and communication. Tour Imagination was founded in 1970 to share the Anabaptist and Mennonite heritage story in Europe. Tour Imagination has led faith-based group tours in more than 50 countries and to every continent. Our mission is to help people of faith experience, explore, and expand their world through group travel. In addition to heritage tours, we offer cultural adventures, cruises, natural wonders tours, and Holy Land tours. We're so glad you've come today to hear a webinar about the Hutterite story in Romania and our upcoming Romania Hutterite and Cultural Tour with Rod Hofer. After his presentation, you can type questions into the chat window to the left of your screen. I'll be reading out the questions and Rod will answer them. Let me briefly introduce Rod to you before I turn the webinar over to him. Rod Hofer is a recently retired environmental engineer from Lawrence, Kansas. His interest in Anabaptist history was nurtured within the Freeman, South Dakota community where he grew up. After attending Bethel College, he joined Mennonite Central Committee as a paxman in Slovenia from 1969 to 1971. This provided the opportunity to travel extensively within Europe. With his wife Roberta, they have returned to Europe numerous times. Before attending their son Tim's 2010 wedding in Alba, Iulia, Romania, the knowledge that the Alwinz Bruderhof had existed nearby stimulated his curiosity about the history of the Hutterites in Romania. Rod's research into this unique Hutterite story led him to write Hutterites in Romania, A Brief History and Guide. Rod curated the Romania Hutterite and Cultural Tour so that he could share this story with family members and others who are interested. Now I'm going to turn the webinar over to Rod. We'll just get him sharing his camera and his microphone on. Rod, that's right, here he comes. Oh, we need to, now you need to unmute your mic too. Just select the microphone icon.
Okay, thank you, Sandra, for that introduction. We have had a fantastic response to this webinar. Welcome and thanks to all of you for making that possible. This webinar is designed to provide you with a taste of what you can expect to see and do on this tour. I hope you will be as excited about it as we are. While Hutterite history is the primary focus of the tour, our desire is to experience much more about this fascinating Eastern. I'd like to load the whoops. There we go. The tour will delve into the rich Saxon German history, including their walled cities and fortified churches. We will experience diverse cultures from the Roma or Gypsies to the Jewish community up close and personal. We will visit feudal castles and modern palaces. Hopefully, you will be inspired by our ancestors, learn from other cultures, and maybe even have some fun on the way. So let's get started. I don't see my advance button on the slides. And oh, here, the map. This is modern Romania. The dark brown indicates the Transylvanian Alps, also known as the Carpathian Mountains. The province of Transylvania is west and north of this mountain range. The province of Moldavia is to the east, and the province of Wallachia and the capital of Bucharest is to the south. The Danube River forms the southern boundary before it spreads out into a broad delta before discharge into the Black Sea. Most of our attention will be diverted towards Transylvania, where many of the cities have dual names, one in Romanian and one in German. The places designated in red signify towns and villages of interest to the Hutterite story. I'm sorry, I can't get there we go. This modern map of East Central Europe highlights some of the geographical areas of significance to the Hutterites. During the latter part of the 16th century, Hutterites experienced their golden age in Moravia, shown in the dark red oval in the middle of the map. Here they grew to nearly 30,000. That abruptly came to an end with the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, when they were exiled from Moravia. Most settled directly across the border in Royal Hungary, shown in blue, now Western Slovakia. A few were taken to Transylvania, 600 miles to the east, and that's shown in yellow. To the lower left, we have the Austrian province of Carinthia. 130 years after the Hutterites arrived in Transylvania, a group of Corinthian Lutherans were deported there. This would initiate a tumultuous period of 15 years, during which time the Hutterites were nearly destroyed by the overzealous Jesuits. The Hutterites would not exist today if 76 Hutterites, 80% of them Corinthian Lutherans, converts, had not escaped over the Transylvanian Alps into Muslim-controlled Wallachia, shown by the white oval south of the Transylvanian Alps. The Hutterites' time in Romania began in 1622, 4 years after the 30 Years' War engulfed Central Europe. This is Gabriel Bethlen, Hungarian, Prince of Transylvania, Calvinist, an ally of the Turks and the Swedes, the two greatest military powers of the time. Hearing about the Hutterites' forced exile from Moravia, he sent an invitation to them offering refuge and religious freedom. Having just been cheated by the Moravian leader, they refused. Gabriel then ordered his army to round up as many Hutterite refugees as they could and bring them to Transylvania at the point of the sword, if necessary. In the fall, 168 Hutterites were brought to Transylvania in 3 scattered groups. With winter fast approaching and realizing that her husband had no plan for what to do with the Hutterites, Princess Susanna ordered that the 3 groups be brought to her castle in Alwinz, where she told them that they could find shelter in her stables until they started building their homes in the spring. This is a ruin of that castle. By Christmas 695, additional Hutterites joined the group in her castle, bringing the total to 863. However, 3 epidemics swept through the group and 400 died. 130 years later, in 1755, over 60 Lutherans from the Austrian province of Carinthia were deported along the route shown in blue. The 1,000-mile, nearly 6-month-long trek landed them in the Saxon German area of Transylvania. The Saxon Germans were well established here. They had come to Transylvania in 1215 to be the laborers, farmers, and soldiers for the construction and maintenance of the country's defenses. The Saxon Germans grew to nearly 250,000 by the beginning of World War I. Although originally Roman Catholic, nearly all the Saxon Germans became followers of Martin Luther during the Reformation. Even though both groups were Lutheran, the Corinthians had an immediate disagreement with their Saxon German hosts over the swearing of oaths. As a result, they were denied homes and land and forced to work as day laborers. Andreas Wirtz and Jörg Waldner soon found employment at the Hutterite Bruderhof at Alwinz. Here they found mutual agreement on numerous religious issues. After hearing that the Corinthians refused to attend the Lutheran Church, the Saxon German lords summoned Andreas Wirtz, Joseph Miller, and Matthias Hofer to appear before them. After refusing to return to the Lutheran Church, they were imprisoned for 3 months, part of which was in the dungeons of the Deva fortress at the top of this mountain, the ruins of which we will visit. The Hutterite Corinthian bond also drew the attention of the Roman Catholic Joseph, spiritual Hutterites, fortress, Wirtz, Hans Kleinsasser, and Jörg Waldner. And I'm trying to get the next slide here, but it's not doing it. There. The Catholic Cathedral is to the upper left in this model of the fortress. Having trouble getting these slides to advance. There we go. They had to be impressed with the power projected by the walls of this newly constructed fortress. As the Catholic Church was the landlord of the Alwinz Bruderhof, the bishop told the Corinthians that if he caught any of them trespassing on his land again, he would have them arrested. He told Kerr that the Hutterites could not give the Corinthians work, lodging, or overnight shelter. We will explore the Alba Iulia fortress, which covers 280 acres. The changing of the guard, dressed in period uniforms of the Austrian army, is a spectacle worth seeing. The fortress has a few more attributes related to Hutterite history. A few years later, the bishop had Joseph Kerr and Martel Roth, the two Alwinz spiritual leaders, summoned in an effort to get them to recant. They remained steadfast and were thrown into this prison for 6 months in the new gate of the fortress, shown here, before being released. Soldiers of the period were often used as Jesuits to enforce their edicts. After the Jesuits moved into Alwinz, they posted soldiers in the doorways of each household in case the residents needed encouragement to attend Jesuit Mass. Also within the fortresses, Bodhaianeum Library. It has one of the largest collections of Hutterite codices, some of which date back to the 16th century. These were probably confiscated during the Jesuit raids of the Alwinz Bruderhof. We've requested that the library display these rare examples of Hutterite writings for us to see. Defying the orders of the authorities to stay away from the Hutterite Bruderhof at Alwinz, Matthias Hofer and Rosina Bildner returned to work at the Bruderhof. After a few weeks, they were discovered, arrested, and imprisoned in the Hermannstadt Penitentiary Workhouse, where the prisoners processed raw wool into blankets. Matthias was soon joined by his brother Michael and 3 Corinthian teenagers who came to visit. Michael died soon thereafter, and Rosina Bildner was released, The others spent 15 years before their release. As you can see, the building is now a restaurant. After the Jesuits had moved into the Alwinz Bruderhof, a few Hutterites that resisted them made repeated attempts to join the new Kreutz Bruderhof 70 miles to the east. It was led by Johannes Kleinsasser and made up of Corinthian Lutheran converts. These Alwinz Hutterites included the ancestors of the Whip, Cheddar, and Stahl families. They were tracked down and imprisoned here in the previous slide. There we go. Before being forced to return to Alwinz. 5 members of the Glanzer family and 12-year-old Gretel Wipf were captured in the village of Stein during their Great Escape. They were eventually imprisoned in here. We will visit the museum that now occupies the building. Another site in Hermannstadt of interest is the former Jesuit Orphanage. After the Jesuits had destroyed the Bruderhof at Alwinz, they set their sights on the Kreutz Bruderhof. The plan was to complete the construction of this Jesuit orphanage and then confiscate the children of any parent who did not recant and place them in the Jesuit orphanage. The orphanage can still be seen in Hermannstadt, although it is showing its age. While waiting for the orphanage to be completed, the Jesuits had the Corinthian Hutterites rounded up and imprisoned within the walls of the fortified church at Kreutz, seen here. One day, Joseph Kerr and Johannes Stahl, who had been exiled from Transylvania 9 months before, returned to learn of the Jesuit plan and that the orphanage was nearly complete. Having just returned through the Transylvanian Alps from Muslim-controlled Wallachia, they immediately set out to find Wallachian guides to help them escape. Traveling only at night, 76 refugees managed to cover the 60 miles or so to the border in 11 nights, shown in the solid yellow. The dashed line depicts the continuation of their journey after leaving Transylvania. However, the small group from Stein, consisting mostly of the extended Glanzer family, were captured before they could escape. I need the next slide. They were taken to the fortified church in Stein and held within its walls. There. Whoops. The next day, they were taken to the fortress at Reps, the ruins of which we will also visit. It was here that Paul Glanzer managed to slip away from the group, eventually joining the rest of the escaping refugees. After a couple of weeks in the fortress at Reps, the prisoners were taken to the City Hall prison in Hermannstadt, shown earlier, where they would spend the next 5 years. In this prison, Paul Glanzer's wife, Barbara, gave birth to their daughter, Susanna. The refugees bypassed the city of Brasov, or Kronstadt, and entered the Barza Valley. Traveling at night and hiding in the forest by day, the refugees moved unseen below the castles and fortresses that dominate the hills above. Bran Castle and its border patrols blocked the escapees' exit from the end of the Barza Valley. We will visit Bran Castle, which has occupied this pass for over 800 years. It has been utilized by everyone from Dracula to Queen Maria, who used it as her personal retreat in the early 1900s. As they neared the foothills below Bran, the guides had them unhitch their wagons and load the most essential supplies onto 4 horses. That evening, the Wallachian guides led them along hidden trails deep into this forest. By morning, they were camped below a steep escarpment of solid rock. That night, they set out again, making a steep ascent to above the tree line. They continued to climb until they reached the crest of the mountain range. Here, the guides told them that they were safe and that they should follow the small stream downhill to Campina, the first substantial town. The guides went back for the wagons, which they soon took through the border and delivered to the Hutterites in Campina. In addition to the Hutterite history, we will have the opportunity to explore the rich history of the Saxon Germans. We will begin and end our tour in Hermannstadt, Sibiu, the former Saxon German capital. This UNESCO World Heritage City displays lots of old world charm. The city tower separates the large and small city plazas, with the small plaza illustrated here in the foreground. The tower provides a nice panorama of the old city. The white building with the steep roof to the right of the photograph in the center is the City Hall prison shown earlier. You will get a bird's eye view of many buildings with the signature Eyes of Hermannstadt windows. There should be time for shopping on the streets. Plan on strolling through the Sibiu Outdoor Museum of Traditional Folk Civilization, which contains examples of traditional construction from all parts of Transylvania. We will see homes with thatched roofs and woven fences. I didn't know what this was until I noticed the door at the bottom middle of this structure. I then recognized it as a corn crib. Also on display are a variety of windmills and other utility buildings. Transylvania's medieval history includes knights and Turkish sultans, strange alliances, and family treachery. We will visit the medieval castle at Hunedoara. It will not be shrouded in scaffolding for our visit, as shown here. This castle is one of the finest examples of a medieval castle in Europe. It was already 200 years old when Gabriel Bethlen, the Hutterite benefactor, renovated it as his palace in the early 1600s. It is not a pretty castle, but rather a cold and drafty defensive stronghold to keep the enemy out and the inhabitants safe. However, if what you want is pretty castles, we can accommodate that desire with a visit to Pellish Castle, built by King Carol I, beginning in 1873. 100 years after the Hutterites had passed through the same valley during their escape, the king selected it for his alpine summer palace. Nearby is Pallisor Castle, built by Queen Maria at the beginning of the 20th century. It was quite modern, with running water and central heating. Throughout the area where we will be traveling are UNESCO fortified churches. These are the best examples of this unique historical construction. This is Prejmir, one of the largest fortified churches. You can see the church steeple peeking out above the heavy outer walls. The inside of the walls contains hundreds of individual apartments to hold the residents seeking protection within the fortified church. Beertron is another UNESCO-designated fortified church. We hope the hillsides will be ablaze with fall colors for our visit. The UNESCO fortified church at Viskry is about 6 miles from the Alwinz Bruderhof. A foundation sponsored by Prince Charles of England has been instrumental in the preservation of this site. From the top of its defensive walls, you can view the countryside that hasn't changed much since our ancestors lived there. To broaden our experience in Transylvania, an Orthodox priest will describe their traditions and beliefs during our visit to a Romanian Orthodox church. Pictured here is the Orthodox Cathedral in Alba, Iulia. While in Alba, Iulia, we plan to visit the oldest Jewish community in Romania, where the rabbi of the synagogue will share their story. The Hutterite benefactor, Gabriel Bethlen, is credited with permitting the establishment of this initial Jewish community. We will visit the ruins of the Caesarian Monastery, founded in the 13th century by monks who were expelled by the king in the 15th century because of the monks' debauchery and gluttony. You can climb the tower at the back of the cathedral ruin to get a view of the outline of the cathedral. This is that view of the cross-shaped floor plan of the cathedral, visible from that tower. The front of the cathedral, the top of the cross, has been closed off and used as a Lutheran church for centuries. In what would have been the main sanctuary of the cathedral, you will see the graves of local soldiers who died in World War I, a not uncommon sight in this part of Transylvania. We have arranged a wine tasting at the former Royal Vintners. The man on the right is Edward, our Romanian guide and host for the tour. The German name for Transylvania is Siebenbergen, which refers to the 7 cities fortified by the Saxon Germans in the 13th century. We will visit 4 of those 7 fortified cities during our tour. This one is Sighișoara. Within the citadel of Sighișoara, we will visit the Torture Museum and view such apparatuses as the rack being demonstrated here. With his arms secured to the rack above and his legs tied to ropes connected to the winch below, turning the winch slowly pulls the victim limb from limb. We also have planned a visit to a Roma or Gypsy village of coppersmiths. Romania has the largest Gypsy population in Europe. I hope this overview of the tour we are planning has stimulated your interest, both in our heritage as well as in that of others. I hope you will join us on this tour. Thank you.
And now we will begin a question time. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box. If you have any questions, you can type them into your chat box.
There we go.
Great. Here's the first question. Have you got any suggestions as to what tour participants can do to prepare effectively to get as much as possible out of the tour? What do you say, Rod?
Well, the one thing would be the book that I had written, Hutterites of Romania, tour guide and a guide and short history. And other than that, you can look up the Saxon Germans on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia was actually a major source for much of the information I had. It'd be the Saxon Germans, and in Wikipedia you get additional sites that you can visit about, like the Saxon Germans will take you to the fortified churches, etc.
The next question, Rod, is will we get to see the area around Bucharest where the Hutterites landed before moving on to South Russia with Count Romanestev?
Yeah, that guy. No, we won't. But one of the things, there is nothing left of anything where the Hutterites were around Bucharest. I mean, it's an empty. Both sites, I think, are empty fields. So there's no sites of interest in Bucharest. They were there for 3 years, and they moved from one site to another because the first site, they were plagued with fever, and I'm not sure if maybe it was malaria that they were coming down with, but they moved to get away from that, and then they ran into the Russian and Turkish armies who were sweeping through the area. Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions?
There's one. I assume you will explain how we can do that. Do what?
Oh, I've got that answered privately, Rod. Rod, you had looked into what the temperature is going to be like in the country at that time. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the temperature at this time, I'm told by my daughter-in-law, is very much like Kansas. And that means that you can expect possibility of frost in the morning and be in shirt sleeves in the afternoon. So my suggestion would, to prepare for this, is to be able to layer your clothes, a shirt, a sweater, a jacket, and then slowly remove and add those as the temperature dictates. October is this year, I was told that October was absolutely glorious in Transylvania with the fall colors.
That's great. Now, so your son is married to a Romanian woman and lives in Romania? They still live in Romania?
They live in Lenexa, Kansas. They live 30
Oh,
miles
okay.
from us here.
Oh, I see.
Uh,
Where they got married in Romania. Is she Romanian?
she is from Alba, Iulia. The
Okay.
photograph of the interior of the Romanian Orthodox Cathedral was from their wedding.
Oh, wow.
But they met as graduate students at the University of Paris and moved here about 3 years ago.
Okay. There's a question here from Philip. We will meet in Cebu. Is that correct?
Sibiu, yes. Sibiu, which is also Hermannstadt.
Oh,
Sibiu
okay.
is its Romanian name. But we will begin and end the tour in Sibiu.
And he's asking if you get there from Bucharest.
Actually, there are flights into port from Germany, I believe. So you can fly directly to the airport in Sibiu. From a good day's train ride to get to Sibiu.
Great. Anything else about maybe what age this tour might be suitable for, Rod?
I'm thinking that it's adults. And
Would teenagers would it be of interest to teenagers?
That depends on the teenager. I mean, it is a fascinating area, both from our history of our families to the history of the Saxon Germans and the Gypsies and the Jewish community in Alba, Iulia. That's fairly diverse. It is a definitely you get the feel of old Europe when you go through these towns. More so than Western Europe, which has modernized greatly. You'll still see horse-drawn wagons common in this part of Romania. So there is, if you want to climb the towers, there is that limitation for certain people because handicapped accessible is not something that they are familiar with. One thing I do want to mention is that the currency is the RON. They do not use the euro, although one can sometimes, because it's a good hard currency, either euros or dollars can sometimes be used. But most of the time, you'll probably want to have some pocket change in RON, and you can. They do have ATMs. Generally, I use my debit card from my bank, but you need to check the agreement with your cards. Visa cards are also generally accepted.
That's good. Philip has a question. Am I correct that the 50,000 or so Hutterites that today live in Canada and the US are descendants of the 80 or so who fled Romania?
Yes. I mean, this got down to the last 78, or 67, 78. I can't remember the number right offhand. But yeah, not very many people. And almost all the Hutterites are related to these people. Although when they got to Russia, they did send some mission. After 20 years, they sent some missions back to the Hutterite colonies that had recanted in Royal Hungary, and quite a few of the old Hutterites joined the Hutterites in Russia at that time. And that's how we got the names Wallman, Mendel, Gross. There was a Cheddar family, a Stahl family, but if you carry that name today, you're descendant from the Stahls and Cheddars that came out of Romania than the ones that came out of Royal Hungary. So anyway, they did add to their numbers, but almost all of us share some of our ancestors from this Romanian group. And the same is true of the Prairie White. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, if unless anybody else has any questions, we'll close it off here. I'll give 1 more minute for people to add questions.
And again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining this webinar, and I hope you find it as interesting as I do, because this is something that I delved into when I went to my son's wedding. It became.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, and we will send you all information and a link to the recording after the presentation. Have a good day.
Thank you.